Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Lynch, and I'm a consultant with the Florida SBDC at Florida A&M University. And today's session is on HR policies in a post-pandemic workplace. So there's several areas that we want to discuss today. One being the decision of adapting to remote work or returning to in-person if it's applicable to your business, workforce strategies, long-term safety protocols, employee communication, and employee engagement. But before we begin, I want to give a brief description of my background. So again, I'm Christina Lynch, a consultant with the Florida SBDC at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. And the primary areas of focus of services that I provide are bookkeeping or management accounting, human resources, and strategic planning. So with that, I assist business owners and entrepreneurs with realigning their business practices to ensure that it meets the needs of the business, developing a solid foundation to ensure that your bookkeeping and HR practices are strong and firm so that way you can focus on the product or service that you provide to your community, and training business owners and employees to maintain the structure that has been developed. So diving right in, the first decision that a lot of business owners have to make is whether you're going to adapt to remote work or return to in-person. And with that, there's three primary factors that we want to discuss. One being addressing employee concerns. So whether you've made the decision to adapt to remote work or if you're still contemplating what to do, you want to consider the concerns of your employees. And with that, it doesn't mean that you're trying to make everyone happy, but being able to listen to what they have to say and what their position is or insight may assist you in being firm in what you're deciding on and being comfortable with your decision, as well as understand the needs of your employees if they have not been met. The second thing to consider is reviewing productivity measures. So some businesses have identified that when their employees are working remote, they're more productive because they have flexibility. Maybe they're introverted or they're tech savvy or feel more motivated to get work done. Other businesses have determined that it's not working and it's less productive. But using that as a measure can help in assisting you in making a neutral decision and doing what's best for your business versus doing what's trending in your area. And lastly, you want to consider the impact to business operations. So if you're adapting to remote work and you don't need as much office space, you might then in turn decide to not renew your office space lease or to downsize to something that's smaller, which could save you money. It may also lead into looking at technological advances of how you can be more efficient if people are not working in the same place. How are people communicating? Are you using a chat or email, using more video calls? Or even if you are returning to in-person after employees have been working from home for a few months or a year, what does that look like? Do you have to rearrange workspaces now due to those employee concerns that were brought up? Do you need a larger space, or is there no more equipment that's needed? So identifying what the impact to your operations is regardless of what you decide on, and looking at objective measures will assist you in being comfortable in making that decision and also comfortable in communicating that. With workforce strategies, there's 5 areas that we want to consider. The first is reflecting. I think we can all agree that no one really imagined what happened in the last year would happen and how it would impact your business. So with that, we want to create time to reflect what occurred in the last year. What have you learned from that? And was there anything that's missed? And using that reflection to determine what are the next steps for your business. What are the priorities for your business? Once you've determined that, it's now time to reinforce that commitment to well-being and purpose through a focus on physical, physiological, and financial concerns. So being able to recommit as we're kind of getting to a point where we can find a new sense of normal and then re-engage our employees. So after determining what you want to do with the business, where you want to go with the business, and what your commitment is, we then have to re-engage employees. And that might mean retraining them to know what, okay, here is how we do things, what, where we want to go with that, but also training on new topics. If someone's been working from home for the last year and now they're returning back to work, we may need to gently remind them of some of the business practices that is required for their business, or how to reuse some of the tools that were in place prior to the pandemic. We want to rethink about how we can utilize new business priorities and reconfigure the work. If in your reflection, you determined that you want to change the direction of the business, or you're implementing change to now adapt to this post-pandemic world that we're slowly getting into, how does that change the employees' jobs? Does that change their expectations? Are you now expecting employees to work differently? Are there ways of being more efficient? So these are things that we have to consider: is what are the effects of the planning that you're doing for your business and the direction in which you want to take your business. And with that, we're then trying to realigning the employer and the employee, and make sure that the business operation priorities are set. So we have to ensure that we're communicating that to employees. But before we can communicate, we have to be secure in where we're going in that business. So utilizing your strategic planning and really the vision of your business is directly integrated with the workforce strategy of what your expectations are from your employees, and how you're going to communicate with them, how you're going to re-engage them in the workplace. Another thing to consider are long-term safety protocols. So if you're an employer that has employees that are physically working in the same space, some things we want to consider is, what does social distancing in the office look like? Is that something that you intend on practicing, or is it something that you're not practicing, you're not going to practice? And if that's the case, considering those employee concerns and seeing how can you have a win-win situation to the best of your ability. We want to remember that we can't resolve every issue, but as an employer, human capital is one of the most valuable assets that you have. So we want to make sure that employees are comfortable coming to work and they're comfortable with the direction of the company, so that way in turn they can be most productive to provide the product or service that you're providing to the community, or supporting the purpose of that business. The second thing we want to consider is proper sanitation of common spaces. What does that look like? Is that more hand sanitizer? Is that providing face masks? Is there public interaction with your employees? So what can we do within a budget to properly sanitize that, to properly sanitize those common spaces or public spaces? Prior to the pandemic, it may not have been as much of a priority, but now that we've gone through this year of really just unexpected events back to back to back, this is now one of the items that's in the front of a lot of employers' minds, is how can we make customers feel comfortable? How can we make our employees feel comfortable and have a cleaner workspace? And then lastly, we want to consider tracking employee health and maintaining privacy. Before the pandemic, it may have been more common if an employee was feeling a little under the weather that they still came to work. Or if they were sick, they may not have been able to work from home, but they just, we just let them stay home until they got better and come back to the office. Now, as we're nearing the end of this pandemic and getting into a post-pandemic era, if someone's feeling under the weather, what are the procedures? What does that look like? Are we going to send employees home? Are we discouraging employees from coming to work? Are we requiring them to get tested for COVID? And then if so, what information can you share if it is COVID related and you want to inform others that they're exposed, and what information can you not share? So we must remember that employees' medical information is protected under HIPAA, and we want to remain in compliance with that, and so that we were not exposing medical information that is supposed to be maintained, that's supposed to be private. So with that, if you don't have a plan of action, I do advise you to consult with someone at the Small Business Development Center in your area, or speak to your attorney. So that way you can have those practices in place. It's more so to be proactive because we all know that at some point we're all going to be under the weather, and making sure there's a procedure in place of how to address that, so that way you don't end up in a place with a labor shortage or with some type of scare or something that could create a drastic reaction. But then also being able to protect employees and not open yourself up to liability. So one of the biggest things when having employees is employee communication. So one of the first two things that I want to talk about is leading in uncertainty and change. So as an entrepreneur or business owner, you know that there's plenty of times where you're winging it, you're flying by the seat of your pants, you're just trying to make things go. You have a lot coming at you at one time. And so you have to make a lot of judgment calls in a quick amount of time. With the pandemic, it's probably 10 times worse. So you're leading in uncertainty and change, but how can you communicate that to employees? So we want to say, if you decide, okay, here are the priorities we're going to go moving forward, this is what we think it's going to look like in the next 5 years, being able to communicate what you're comfortable communicating with, and then being able to say if there's areas you're unsure about and employees ask about that, being comfortable in saying, I don't know, or hey, we're still figuring that out. It's not always about having all of the answers, but it's about communicating clearly so employees know your position. And 50% of any battle with employees is always the communication, and it's listening and it's understanding. So no one expects for you to have all those answers. Being able to lead and be confident in the direction in which you're going in will allow employees to feel comfortable in following you in that direction and being loyal to the business and company. And if they're not, then those are the employees that you do want to replace anyways, right? So that way you have a solid, strong team for your business. The second thing is identifying and addressing your approach and values. So we talked about having that time for reflection where we look back a year or so and say, okay, this is what's happened, this is what we've learned, and this is where we want to go with the business. A lot of business owners are coming up with creative ways to stay in business, to transform the business to meet the current needs of their community. But then what are the values that are tied to that? So for instance, if you decide that customer service is now your priority as a business, and you want to take the company in a direction where I really want to focus on customer service being number one. I want to be like Chick-fil-A, where no matter what happens, it's always a positive experience. That's fine, but what are the values tied to that? And how do you communicate that to employees? So if employees don't know that customer service is now number one, they can't follow you in meeting that expectation. Furthermore, even if you say, hey guys, communication is now number one, still, what is the approach to getting there? You have to have steps in place to ensure that employees are on board, that they're trained, and they know what to do in order to meet that expectation. So for the values piece, that might mean emphasizing honesty, emphasizing conflict resolution, integrity, right? So those are values tied to the goal and the direction in which you want to take the company, with customer service being number one. Also, what's the approach? That might mean providing customer service training to employees, but that would be one piece. The second piece might be, okay, well, we want to also have conflict resolution training, because if they communicate with a lot of customers and we want to make sure customer service is always at its best, employees also need to know how to react if something was to go wrong, or if a customer is dissatisfied. So looking at what the approach is and the most effective way of getting there without really burning a lot of resources is going to be important as well. So how we communicate to employees, not just the direction we want to go in, but what are the values tied to that, and the approach tied to that will then help getting your business where it needs to go to meet those goals, but also allow you to then focus on the purpose of your business and managing your business so you're working on it and not working in it. So then the last one I want to discuss is employee engagement. So studies have shown that when employees are engaged, they're more productive, they're more effective, and they're more efficient. So how can we drive employee well-being? and integrate a sense of being people focused. So with that, we are all humans. We all have good days. We all have bad days. The idea that leave your personal problems at home is difficult, especially coming from out of a pandemic where almost everyone has been impacted in one way or another. So by driving that employee well-being, you're supporting employees being more engaged, and they're going to work harder, they will work smarter, and they're going to believe in the purpose of your business. When you hired them, the intention was them to fulfill that purpose. And so giving them the space to be engaged and providing the resources to be engaged is going to in turn benefit you as the business owner. So again, how do we integrate a sense of being people focused into the goals and the direction that you want to take the business in, especially if you need employees to get there? So being an employer that provides that support and the training and resources will help in really driving that your business up to growing to where you desire it to be. Second, we want to shift from being managing the employee experience to managing life experience of your employees. So prior to the pandemic, in the HR world, managing the employee experience was huge. It was about making employees feel welcomed, making them feel comfortable and open, and providing them whatever it was they needed to work and be happy. Now we're slowly getting to managing the life experience of employees. As we're coming out of this pandemic, I mentioned almost everyone has been impacted in one way or another. So there's a lot of people that may have lost loved ones, where loved ones may have had health issues. There's been societal events that could have impacted people emotionally. So keeping that in mind when employees come to work and giving them space and grace that they need in order to be the best version they can for that day. So we want to make sure that we keep in mind when employees come to work that we're all human and we have emotions and we have experiences that we're bringing with them. And as an employer, we want to make sure we're providing that support to do that. And that's where you'll see a lot of employers coming out about diversity statements, about being integrated into the community. So that corporate social responsibility and giving back and making sure that your position is clear and where you stand, and providing that for employees will help them and being more engaged. So again, when you have open communication with employees and you give employees the opportunity to be engaged, that in turn gives you more employees that are more productive. At the end of the day, we're all doing this because we want to manage our resources, including our human capital. They are a critical part of your operations, and we want to make sure that we give them all of the resources we can, that when it's not always tied to money, but giving them the resources they need to be the best employee they can for you. That will allow people to stay longer, and they will stay with you longer, which will help you to grow, transform, and really just refine to be the best company you can be to provide the product or service that you normally are giving to the community. So with that, are there any questions? I know that in the HR world, questions are usually very specific to the company. So I wanted to make sure that I give time in order to answer any questions that people may have, or if they're uncertain about anything coming out of the pandemic. So one question that's come through is, are there any platforms online where you can get templates or drafts for some of these HR policies? So if you're a member of SHRM, the Society for HR Management, they have a bunch of different templates that you can utilize. And it's S as in Sam, HRM as in Mary.org. I believe they have articles, and some articles are free if you're not a member, but that would be one resource. Another resource you can use is HR.com. I believe it's free, and they also have policy and procedure templates. They have training videos, and so a bunch of information that you can utilize there as well. It's one of my favorite. That's where I get a lot of my video, where I watch a lot of videos on different HR topics. For the second question, we provide classroom instruction and will require face coverings for clients and the instructor as we resume live classes. If the instructor is vaccinated, is it best practice to still require him or her to wear a face covering since clients are required to? I know we are not allowed to verify whether clients are vaccinated, and that is why all will be required to wear one. I would say that's really up to you. I can't say what's best, better, best, or worse, but I know there's some companies that will require like the employee to wear it, so the customers don't, or vice versa. The biggest thing is being consistent among your policies. So it's optional or it's not, or if you're going to do, hey, you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear one. If you're not, don't. As you said, it is very difficult to determine whether or not someone is vaccinated, and requiring them to prove that to you. So it depends. It really depends on you. I personally am more conservative, so I still wear a mask, just because I want to consider the other person's health. But what I would do is, if you're going to require, just make a policy and stick to the policy. So it's, if someone's vaccinated, you don't have to wear it. And only speaking for your instructors, if you're not vaccinated, you have to wear it. And then, or keeping it optional, saying, hey, if you're vaccinated, you have the option of whether to wear it or not. But I would say, regardless of whatever it is that you choose, leave it up to the people in the classroom. So if the instructor does not want to wear it, I would gauge the classroom and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I've been vaccinated. I want to make sure everyone is comfortable that I take off my mask. That is my recommendation, is keeping it optional, but really gauging the classroom. So if the students are uncomfortable with it, then the instructor may want to wear the mask, only because you want to make sure that everyone in the classroom is comfortable with it. And if there is people that are uncomfortable, you may lose students otherwise. Are there any other questions? Oh, yes. What are some factors to consider when shifting to managing the life experience of your employees in the workplace? Oh, that's a good question. So one is emotional intelligence. So when someone's in the workplace, and like I have several employees, and if they are not their normal selves, one thing I do is I take that into consideration, that it may not be me or the workplace, right? So being able to take that in mind and understand that everyone's background is different, their experiences are different, and what they went through is different. I provide space and to let them communicate, and I'll ask, is everything okay? And I will try to take the context of what they're communicating versus their delivery method, especially if it's outside of their normal behavior. And that way I can always address that later and say, hey, I noticed you're upset. Is everything okay? But I want to make sure that I'm extracting the message that they're communicating more than anything. So giving them that space and grace, knowing that we're all adapting to change and not understanding everything that they may have gone through. You also want to give that empathy as well, when communicating with people and helping with that transition. When do you think we will be back to normal? That is a really good question. I don't know. I don't think 2021 is going to be the year. It's probably more of a transitional year. And then depending on how it goes this year, it may be another a year or two. It'll also depend on people. So introverted, for example, introverts are having the time of their life quarantining. And so they're okay with everything the way it is. And there's others that are really gung-ho about getting back to this normal. I don't think normal is going to be what it is. I think it'll be a new sense of normal, but I still believe it'll take a couple years before we all feel like everything has stabilized. And then you address incentives for getting back. Oh, can you address incentives for getting vaccinated, day off or vacation time? It is something that is acceptable. And I have heard of employers that have provided incentives to get employees to get vaccinated. So I know for one company, they just simply said, hey, you can get it on the company time if you get vaccinated. Others are trying to give like PTO days or something of the sort. So it really just depends. Again, it's all about being consistent. And there's some that are requiring the vaccination, and they're saying if you don't get vaccinated, you have to work from home. So the biggest thing is making sure that you're consistent, and that one one group of that one demographic is not discriminatorily, impacted by whatever policy or incentive that you have. So I want to thank everyone for their time, and I have provided my contact information. So if you have any HR questions, bookkeeping questions, or strategic planning questions, please feel free to reach me. My name is Christina Lynch. I'm a consultant with the Florida SBDC at Florida A&M University, and my email is christina.brown@floridasbdc.org. So thank you and have a great day.